Alright, I have a bit of a confession to make. I have already written the script for this video and recorded that. I've actually done a couple of takes, and I was reviewing the footage that I've taken to play in the background. You know, I decided, yeah, I'll do my own gameplay footage. And reviewing that footage, I've sat on it for a day or so now, and I keep coming back to this one clip in particular, and it's just making me change my video because, to be quite frankly honest, I feel like the original video I had planned and scripted and recorded doesn't really do it justice. And I'm going to play you that clip right now. Don't worry, it's only 20 seconds that you'll have to part with my wonderful voice.
Target ready. Fire! Your system's malfunctioning. You're being damaged. Be careful.
It was actually 24 seconds, I lied. But do you see how, like, genuinely awesome that clip is? Because I was playing that and I just thought, oh, that was a really cool moment, let's go watch that back. And I was like, yeah, that looks like a really cool moment, great, that's going straight in the video. But then I kept watching it back every single time, I just on a loop, you know, for the past day or so. And to be honest, this is the reason why this game is an underrated masterpiece. This 20-second clip, I've just done a complete 180 on well, I say complete 180. My original video was going to be well, it's a good game, it's a bad game, it's got some good things, it's got some bad things, overall probably sits somewhere in the middle, so people who kind of rated it as a semi-mediocre game, fair enough. Personally, I enjoy it, but I realise it's a very flawed game. I disagree with that now. It is a fantastic game. I mean, again, it's not flawless, right? But the combat system in this game is so interesting, but more importantly, it is so specific to Transformers. It's the only game I've played, the only Transformers game I've played, that actually gets transforming correct. And I'm gonna go into why. So, the 2007 tie-in game and the War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron, you know, the High Moon games, right? They're good. They're good games, right? I mean, I say even the games after High Moon Studio left, they maybe not, but they use the similar kind of High Moon control system. So, in the 07 game, you toggle transforming, I believe, by pressing the Y button on Xbox. So you press Y button, you're a car, and you drive around with pretty conventional controls. And you needed to, because the map was quite big, and, you know, you can't really be navigating a map that size with, you know, awkward controls. So fair enough, right? There would be several instances where you'd expect to be in vehicle mode, but stationary, right? Makes sense. Transformers for Cybertron and War for Cybertron, they have a similar system, so you click a button. I think you actually have to click down on the right analog stick, which was a little bit awkward in my opinion, but then you're in vehicle mode. And their vehicle mode differed quite a bit because you could actually have full you know, 2D movement, right? X and Y axis. So you could strafe around just as you would in robot mode, which kind of, oh, and you could also jump as well. So it's like less of a big difference between being in vehicle mode and being in robot mode, considering you have complete freedom of movement. The only difference is you have different weapons. Usually your vehicle mode weapons are a bit weaker, and you can't use your abilities, or you can only use some abilities, if I remember correctly. No, actually no. Your ability is replaced by boost, I think. So, yeah, essentially, it was a bit of an odd choice, but it made sense at the time, so fair play to them. And again, I'm not saying either of those games are bad. No, those games are still just as good as they were, but, you know, Transformers 2 has a completely different system. So instead of a toggle system, it is hold to go into vehicle mode. You're holding the right trigger down, and obviously the right trigger is the acceleration as well. So right as soon as you hold down that trigger, you are just going, right off the bat. That's what I was trying to say. But yeah, you're just propelling yourself forward. So it's very quick, it's very snappy, it's very responsive, right? You hold right trigger, off you pop. And it's quite good as well because it's whatever direction your character is facing, or whatever direction, whatever direction your character is facing and or moving, as opposed to whatever direction the camera is in. So if you very quickly need to jump away, make a quick escape, you're not going to awkwardly transform and try and do a U-turn to get away from whoever, or try and awkwardly reverse out. No, you can just very quickly transform and immediately start running away in that direction, which is quite good. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the kind of differences. So with the Revenge of the Fallen control scheme, if you're going from robot mode to vehicle mode, if you hold down A, you do an advanced jump. If you hold down B, you do an advanced ground pound. And if you hold down X, you do an advanced melee attack, right? Fairly self-explanatory. But the thing is, you're still stuck in these transformation, like, animation frames, right? So if you miss your target, you're going to get punished for that. So there is some risk-reward there. It's not like a guaranteed hit or, zero risk. But at the same time, you have a reason to actually use your vehicle mode aggressively, right? You have a reason to drive towards the enemy, because you can do quite a neat little attack. It's one of the few attacks in the game that can actually knock enemies back that far and stagger them, right? So you have very much a strong incentive to use these kind of attacks specific to transforming, right? You have a strong incentive to transform and use that mechanic aggressively. And you also have that incentive because as you're approaching, you're obviously in vehicle mode, you're going much faster than you would be in your standard robot mode, but also you're a much smaller target, which does, it is a factor, right? I'll play a clip right now showing that, yeah, here's a Decepticon throwing a vehicle. If I was in robot mode approaching, that vehicle would have smacked me right in the face, but because I'm in vehicle mode, it flies right above my head, which is just really cool. But anyway, yeah, the problem is, though, in the 07 game and in the High Moon control scheme, again, it's not just limited to War 4 and Fall of Cybertron. Subsequent games reused the High Moon control scheme, even when it didn't really make sense to do so. But anyway, the point is, you still have those animation frames, right? Those vulnerable frames where you're transforming, where you can't really dodge, you can't really return fire, you can't really do anything, you're kind of stuck, right? And you certainly can't melee anything, right? So it's a bit of an awkward one to try and drive towards the enemy and then transform at their feet. Best case scenario, you're going to very awkwardly kind of bump into them a bit until you're fully transformed, and then you can hit them. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is they're going to punish you for that because you're just sat there, so you're giving the enemy some free hits, right? So when you're transforming from vehicle mode to robot mode, you don't really want to do that close to the enemy, not too close, right? Ideally you want to be kind of already in robot mode, ready to fight. And likewise, transforming from robot mode to vehicle mode, you want to do that in a situation where you're not under direct enemy fire, or you're not, there's no one on top of you, right? Because again, those frames, that's what's going to do you in. So what you end up with is a situation where transforming in these Transformers games ends up being something that you use to reposition or to retreat when there's a bit too much pressure on top of you. Right, you need to get away. This is your boost to in a separate direction, or it's to kind of traverse the map in a means faster than walking. Right, literally your vehicle mode is essentially as a game mechanic akin to a vehicle. Right, it's very akin to a Skyrim horse. I feel like that's a fair assessment. Whereas in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, your vehicle mode, it's more than just a vehicle. It's like a sprint with some added features, and those features give you so many more options in combat, not just to attack things, but just for like vertical movement, just on the dime, right? So it's just really, really fun. It's really interesting, and it just allows for so much more like aggressive gameplay, but also, you know, you feel less like a robot who just so happens to be able to turn into a car, and more like a transformer, where this alternate mode is definitely part of your strategy and your movement and your attacks, right? And more importantly, they're part of your attacks in a way that's not scripted. Because the only other game I can think of that gets close to this, again, I've not played every Transformers game, so if I'm wrong, please correct me, because I sure as hell want to play more games that do this. But the only game I can think of that goes anywhere close to this is Transformers Devastation. And even then, those are scripted movesets, so it's really not very dynamic, it's not really up to you. You press a button or two, and now Optimus Prime kind of does a little, you know, he goes into a truck, and then he kind of spins around, and then he, you know, pops back up, and it isn't really you doing that, it's you pressing some combination of buttons to do that, right? But yeah, it's just, it's genuinely a shame that people criticize the game specifically for the change in the in the controls, right? So I did a bit of research, a bit of googling, I should say. So there are a lot of reviews out there, not just from players but from games journalists as well, who slate the controls and, you know, really don't like the game, and the thing that they latch onto is the controls. And the reason I think for that is people, they don't, when they're writing a review or thinking about how much they enjoyed a game, they don't sit down and think, well, okay, am I being analytical? Am I being objective? Am I being reasonable? Is my perspective alright? You know, is it kind of, yeah, is it free from bias? And they don't sit in a room for 30 minutes thinking about these questions. They're just like, no, I don't like the game. Open up the page, type out a review about some of the things that they didn't like. First things that pop into their head, and that tends to be the thing that they latch onto. And you're probably going to say, well, how do you know that? And how, you know, people maybe just don't like the control scheme, right? I think this is the case because it's the same criticism you get for the Transformers films, right? The Michael Bay films. Now again, I'm not exactly an apologist for Michael Bay, or the Bayformers films. I know that they absolutely, you know, assassinated the character of Optimus Prime. I did an entire video that basically taking a piss out of that, but essentially, most people's criticism of the Michael Bay films is, oh, it's just big robots, explosions, that sort of stuff, right? Switch your brain off. It's just a dumb action film, right? And it's like, well, there's action in it, but if you actually break down the runtime, most of that is not robots and explosions. So what about the rest of the film? What's the criticism there? Because it's such an easy thing to latch onto the whole, oh, it's just a CGI explosion fest. And it's like, there's more to it than that. You spend most of the film following various characters, following various plot lines, listening to characterization and you know, dialogue, right? And the reality is, these films have a consistently poor characterization, consistently weak dialogue, consistently poor comedy, and consistently, what's the right word? Not deranged, but plot lines that just don't make any sense, right? And, you know, you mix all of that together, and it's like, well, yeah, you know, there are redeeming qualities to the films as well, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, if you want to latch on to actual criticisms of the film, very few people go beyond the basic, oh, it's just an explosion, it's just an action film, you know? They just latch on to that, even though what they actually found lacking in the film could be a wide variety of things. But they never latch onto that because it's never like a conscious, active thing that they're thinking about. It's just, I don't like this film, why don't I like this film? And they latch onto the biggest thing they can find. Anyway, it's a known phenomenon, but rambling on a little bit. Yeah, as you can see, a lot of the footage I'm playing over this, it's showing fairly interesting gameplay in my honest opinion, right? I've never played a Transformers game that let me do this sort of stuff. Even in that 20-second clip, that reminds me quite heavily of the G1 introduction, the original one in 1984, where Skywarp just throws Jazz. Jazz turns into his robot mode, into his vehicle mode, basically does a U-turn and launches himself back at Skywarp, ready to absolutely knock his lights out, right? That's the kind of vibe that I get from that 20-second clip, right? But anyway, point is though, it's genuinely has some very strong merits, and I do know, because the next question you might be wondering is, okay, if this is so good, why hasn't every other Transformers game picked up on this control scheme? And the reason for that, in my opinion at least, is that the games industry is not as intelligent as you think. I am saying this having worked in the games industry for a few months now. Not very long, but a lot of it is flying by the seat of your pants, and a lot of the people who are forking over the big sums of cash, the people who at the end of the day are making the big decisions as to what projects are going to get made and what big decisions are going to get made, you might be able to create an argument to say, well, actually people are not annoyed with this control scheme. That's not the reason why the game bombed. Yeah, and you might be able to put together some very compelling research, and you could do some focus groups, whatever. The point is, though, to the person forking over the cash for however many millions this project is going to cost, they're not going to buy it, right? They're not going to risk it. They're not going to touch it with a barge pole. And so it's really disappointing to see this combat system never, it never gets picked up again, and it never evolves, and it never progresses. It doesn't get polished, it doesn't get refined, because, don't get me wrong, as fun as that combat system is, driving is quite glitchy in this game, right? It feels like half the time you're bouncing off of walls and kind of glitching awkwardly into the ground, or like awkwardly kind of bumping into like flat terrain. Like if there's a slight incline, there's like an awkward series of sound effects to sound like you're crashing into something. Anyway, point is though, it's a big shame, right? It's a very big shame. And I do feel like maybe not the War for Cybertron series, right? Maybe that's not the best place to implement this, just because of the map designs and the setting and, stuff like that. But I do feel like, especially, the Transformers 3 tie-in game and the 4 tie-in game, I might have actually played those games, even though they're awful games. If they had this combat system, I might have still had fun with those games. But alas, they don't. They follow the same High Moon combat system, and the High Moon games are great, but the things that they don't really excel at, kind of, is combat. Sorry to say. Like, great story, great sound design, great visuals, great set design, fantastic world building, fantastic character writing. Not so good combat, not so interesting combat, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not completely flat the entire way through, but for a Transformers game, there's really very little involvement when it comes to utilising your alternate mode. But anyway, that's kind of the long and short of it. But this is the reason why I personally believe that... not personally. This is the reason why I believe that Transformers 2 is an underrated masterpiece. I was gonna try and fob it off there and say, well, in my opinion, personally, this is no. I'm gonna own some responsibility here and actually say, no, it is a good game, or at the very least, it's a game that introduced an amazing combat system, and it's such a shame that it never evolved past this game. Never got picked up, right? Humongous shame. Just because of the number of cool things that you can do, the cool moments that you can have, the cool combinations that you can try, and it's just really cool. It's so many different, abilities that, so many different little, almost parkour little tricks that you can do. It's neat, right? it feels very satisfying to play, and watching it back, it's very satisfying to watch. So, yeah, in that sense, it's a very big shame that it's not really more... Well, it's not really got the reputation it deserves. Revenge of the Fallen, the mediocre film, somehow has a phenomenal game. Yeah, anyway. I have yet to create a compelling outro,